What's up guys, welcome back to the IMAT Success Academy YouTube channel, and if you're preparing for the IMAT 2026, you're in the right place. In this video, we're going to be talking about the physics section of the IMAT. So we'll be looking at what to expect in this 2026 edition. Also, we'll be looking at some frequent topics that often shows up in the IMAT when it comes up to physics, and we're going to be identifying some patterns, some questions that we can see very often, and it's very easy to answer them. Also, we're going to be giving you away some tips in this video, and most importantly, we're going to be carefully looking at some common mistakes that students often make and that can cost you easy points. So let's just jump straight to the video. Alright guys, so here we are, and first thing first, it's very likely that at the moment you're watching this video, the official IMAT syllabus hasn't yet been released, but that's not a problem because based on the previous years, we expect that the syllabus will maintain essentially unchanged. And when it comes up to physics, just for you to have an idea, we are going to have physics bind to mathematics. So these two sections, they occupy 13 questions of all 60 questions that we can find in the IMAT. And usually physics is responsible for 6 to 7 questions of the whole exam. I know you might think this is not a big deal, only 6-7 questions, but think about it, it's almost 10% or even more of the whole exam. That's a lot. And beside that, you cannot forget that physics and mathematics are one of those subjects that will separate students that will be accepted in high competitive universities from the ones that will be accepted in low ranking universities or even accepted at all. And I'm going to tell you another big reason for you to focus on physics. Usually students, they spend hours in focusing a lot in biology, chemistry. Well, guess what? They want to become doctors, so it makes a lot of sense. The score of these students are usually the same. What will actually matter is going to be the score in physics and mathematics. That will be the difference. And between you and me, if you compare physics and mathematics, physics actually going to be the place you're going to find those extra points more easily, okay, and stand out from the other applicants. Alright guys, so moving on, I want to talk about the syllabus. As I mentioned before, the official syllabus haven't been released, but based on the previous year, we're going to probably see the same. Now, I'm going to leave here someplace in the video the full syllabus so you can pause the video and take a look of each detail. But in general lines, okay, what you're going to be finding when it comes up to what they want you to know, it's going to be subjects simple as the measurements and quantities. Okay, we're going to be detailing each one of these topics, so I'm just going to go over them. Kinematics and dynamics, and I can already say that this really takes the cake when it comes up to physics. Fluid mechanics and electrodynamic and electrostatic. Okay, these topics are the main 6 topics that you're going to be finding on the syllabus. Now, it's important to say that all these topics here that we're going to be talking today, the way they're going to ask you is going to be always on a high school level, okay? Not a deep understanding of the details, not something theoretical. It's always really practical and straight to the point. So you don't have to go too crazy when it comes up to the physics questions. But let's just move on and talk about the first topic here, measurements and quantities. Alright, so guys, I'm going to be honest with you, when it comes up to measurements and quantities, there's not much to say here. It's true as well that they have a history of low frequency. If you track down to 2015, you're probably going to find 2 or 3 questions about this topic, but whenever you come across one of these questions, okay, you cannot let it go without a bruise, okay? You got to beat these questions down. And all you're going to need for that is having a good conceptual understanding, okay, of the international systems. So usually a typical example of questions you might see of measurements and quantities will be basically questions that will be asking you to match the physical quantities, okay, with their specific international system unit, okay? So for example, you will have to know that when it comes up to energy and work in physics, the international unit will be the joule, okay, the J here. Force, it's always going to be Newton when it comes up to the high school level of physics. Also pressure like Pascal, power, the watt, frequency, the hertz, and so on. There are other that I could be listing here, but the true thing is it's going to be a matter of memorizing and having them very solid, which will come naturally if you are on top of the practical questions. Alright guys, so moving on here to our next topic, we're going to be talking about number 1. You can see that we make no mystery here. We're already showing you what exactly the IMAT are going to ask you the most, okay? The priority is going to be kinematics. Kinematics is, I don't know why, but they really enjoy asking questions about this. And since 2015, we can track down at least 12 questions, as you can see here in our graphic that we carefully took a look of all the questions we could see from 2015 to 2025. Kinematics is on the top of the list, okay? Right below we have dynamics, and we're just going to talk about this in a sec. Now, when it comes up to kinematics, okay, usually they like to ask questions with uniform linear motion, okay? So this is, I don't know if you have traumas with this with the high school, but I did. But this is something that at least whenever you see these questions on the IMAT, they're not going to be too complicated, okay? They're going to be the basics. So memorizing the formulas, memorizing some classics example will already be enough for you. So harmonic motion, circular motion, and acceleration acceleration graphics, okay? So having these main formulas in your head is really going to save you a lot. And because they do clearly know, at least I hope they know, that you do not have all the time in the world to do long calculation questions. Usually the questions will be focused on the relationship between some variables, okay? So like velocity and acceleration, or velocity and time. So you be able to recognize these variables and see how they are alternating. That will actually be some important skill for you. So analyzing graphics or analyzing what is actually going on. All right, so we talked about kinematics, and now the most natural thing to do would be talk about dynamics, right? These two topics are really correlated. So it's no coincidence that dynamic is actually the second most frequent topic asked in the IMAT, with exactly 9 questions since 2015. But the main difference here is that while we could kind of relate on 3 to 4 main topics in kinematics, when it comes up to dynamics, we have so many different things that we could be talking about. So as for example, we have at least 7 different topics here that we could be talking about dynamics, that we could be seeing in the exam. Of course, there are some patterns, okay, like Newton laws, for example. They are usually heavily present in this exam, but it demands a really good understanding of the whole dynamics process, okay, of conservation of energy, to be able to sort some of the questions. So differently from kinematics, where we would be focusing on one formula and specifically and analyzing the variables in this formula, here in dynamics, we're going to probably be using different types of dynamics forces and correlating these concepts to be able to sort the problem, okay, to find a solution for the problem. So in general lines, for you to be able to succeed when it comes up to any dynamic questions from the IMAT exam, it's really important for you to have a deep conceptual understanding, so you're going to be able to do these integrations and connections from each one of the concepts. Now, before we move on to the next topic, an extra piece of information I want you to take away here is that, especially when it comes up to dynamics, there is a particular correct way for you to actually climb this ladder, okay? So because there's so many topics, so many different things, it's easy for you to just go crazy and just ignore this topic. But if you actually follow the steps, it all makes sense. And the most beautiful thing is that it's going to integrate with different topics of the whole physics, even topics that we're going to be speaking in just a minute, just like electrostatic, electrodynamics, okay? And I don't even have to say, you know, here at the Success Academy, you're going to find some solid playlists, okay, with good teachers that will be able to hold your hand and walk you through each one of these little sections. All right, so let's move on and talk about fluid mechanics and thermodynamics. Now, when it comes up to fluid mechanics, this is one of those topics in physics that if you have a good understanding of the whole integration of physics, this is going to look like child play for you. But don't worry, because even if even physics is not your thing, you're not going to have a big problem with it. In the past 10 years, we only had like 3 questions of fluid mechanics, and whenever we see questions like this, they're mostly focused on Archimedes principles and Pascal law. And I'm going to be honest here with you don't really need extremely detailed knowledge for answering these questions, but a good understanding of the underlying constants will actually do for you. Now, thermo appears a little bit more frequently with 5 questions since 2015, and usually the topics are involved in specific heat capacity, latent heat, and heat transferring. Again, the calculations are generally simple. You can have questions focused on temperature changes, for example, but in general lines, they're all about understanding what happened physically rather than just making some complicated calculations. All right, so about electrostatic and electrodynamics. This is another high yield topic you should be focusing on. We had 9 questions since 2015, and there's one clear pattern we can see constantly. For some reason, the IMAT loves asking about electric simple circuits among their questions. So typically on these questions, you can think about finding the equivalent resistance, current in circuits, voltage relationship, that's also really important. The Ohm's law, can even mention how important that is, and the differences between series and parallel circuits. So it's important to say that you should be comfortable analyzing some circuits diagram without a calculator. Always remember that the IMAT is not a traditional exam that is evaluating your capacity of making complicated calculations. Alright guys, so let's sum up what we have spoke so far, okay? I told you guys that we had 12 questions of kinematics, 9 questions of dynamics, 9 questions of electrostatic and electrodynamics, 5 questions of thermodynamics, 3 questions of fluid mechanics, and 2 questions of measurements and quantities. So just by telling you this, you can clearly see that the IMAT is favoring 3 main topics that will be kinematics, dynamics, and electrostatics. Okay, we're talking about 30 questions. So if you're short in time and not completely comfortable with physics, and if you're watching this video as the date we post, you're definitely short in time. We're 2 months away from the IMAT. I strongly recommend you to focus on these 3 main topics here, okay? This is going to cover 75% of the physics sections we had seen since 2015. And once again, guys, I told you you this before, but it's never too much to emphasize. A lot of students, unfortunately, they have this misconception of the IMAT as this standard or traditional exam, especially the ones who are taking the exam for the first time. So you will not be asked to solve pages of calculations, okay? Instead, it's important for you to actually truly understand the concept and understand what is actually behind of the physical phenomena. And beside that, the IMAT will constantly test you to see if you're able to connect different ideas together to find a solution. So forget about that idea of a physics question asking you to calculate this complicated equation, okay? You can leave that to math, okay? Instead of asking you how to calculate this, it will most likely be asking you which one of these statements here must be true under XYZ condition. So you can rest assured that probably you're going to face a question where you're going to have to use a little bit of logic and a little bit of physics intuition to be able to sort the question. If not to sort the question, at least to eliminate 1 or 2 or 3 options of your pool of statements. All right, so here goes my 3 main tips for you that are preparing for the physics section of the IMAT 2026. First of all, understand the concept. I know I have been saying this word the whole video, but guys, I hope at this point here it's clear for you that the IMAT works differently. A lot of students memorize loads of formula by heart, but then when it comes to the actual moment to put into action, that just breaks apart. And no wonder, memorizing formulas without understanding where they come from is not efficient for the IMAT strategy. And believe when I say this, if you understand the concept, you will likely recognize the correct option, even if the question is kind of weird for you. Second tip here, guys, don't spend hundreds of hours trying to solve a complicated question, okay? If you feel that you're actually putting too much time into one question, something is wrong. Remember, you cannot use calculators. So most of the questions, whenever there is calculation, they're supposed to be easy. So for those questions, logic and a minimal arithmetic calculation, that should be enough for you to answer the question. And for our third tip here, guys, I know it might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but for this tip here, I'm going to recommend you to create one sheet. One sheet is more than enough for you to write down some important formulas of each different sections of physics. Remember when we were talking about kinematics, that is one example where formulas will help you, but not only that, sometimes the IMAT will expect you to remember some basic and important formulas, like for example when it comes up to dynamics and Newton laws. And before we move on, we're almost at the end of this video, guys. I appreciate you all for watching until this point. If you are, I have no doubts you're going to succeed in the IMAT this year. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But I just want to stress a little bit more about this last tip here about the formula, guys. It's really important for you all to make this collection of most important ones and print it out and stick it somewhere you can see it every day, because it's very common you may come across some questions in physics where it's going to describe you some phenomenon, for example, and it's going to ask you which one of these formulas here best represent this situation. And if you do not know the formula, it might be a little bit more complicated for you. Instead of a question that you could be answering in 2 seconds, it's going to take you like minutes, or you won't even be able to answer the question. So stick with the formulas, the important ones. Alright, so final thoughts here, guys. I hope that if it wasn't clear before, I hope at this point here you are aware of how important it is to study physics for the IMAT. You guys know that by each year the IMAT is getting more competitive, and physics is your best chance to stand out. And I know a lot of students neglect physics, thinking that it's too hard, too complicated, too much to learn or to memorize. But you got to remember that IMAT works in different gears, and physics for them is just about understanding if you're actually capable of connecting dots that later on will be important even in your career as a doctor. So don't stress too much with physics. Stick with the basics, the most important things, the high school level. I have no doubts that overcoming this fear of physics and mastering these main topics will be really rewarding. Those extra points you might get will make the whole difference for your improvement and for your final goal. And as always, if you're looking for a comprehension IMAT preparation, we are here to help you. Here at the IMAT Success Academy, our students receive a comprehensive study material, also a carefully selected textbook, and something that is really important for me, that is a realistic exam simulation. We also have a large question banks for you to prepare yourself, and we have private lessons with people that actually know what they're doing. If you would like to know a little bit more about this, check out our website, link below. If you found this video useful and helpful in any way, don't forget to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We also have an Instagram page where we're constantly updating information about the IMAT and giving you some tips, so you don't want to miss that out. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one.